Stand with Stephen Carr. Today we have a very special guest with us who needs no introduction whatsoever. It is Nick Shields. He is in the military, Army infantryman, as well as the York County Young Republicans chairperson for this year. And he is also running to be the York County GOP chairman in this upcoming spring or reorganization meeting for the chairman election as well. He has some very important information we're going to be talking about the state the state of York County voter demographics and the importance of changing the political landscape in York County and why it is so important and what we can do about it. So where'd you like to start, Nick?
Well, first, Stephen, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor. I know you've been on a roll here with your podcast, and we get some really great guests on. I saw Mike Jones on recently, saw Mark Anderson, Maria Batista. So you're on a roll, man. Good for you. But we can really just jump. Actually, before we jump in here, we have to give a shout out to DJT and Melania Trump. It's their 20th anniversary today, so happy anniversary, Donald Trump and Melania. But after saying that, we can just jump right in here. So, yeah, I guess we'll start off with just the changing demographics of York County. It's no surprise, we're coming off a kind of a humbling defeat in 2025. Again, we lost the statewide retention with our judicial candidates, and it was kind of an uphill battle for us, being outspent 4-1 statewide. Again, we also lost a lot of our statewide judicial races as well, which was tough. Even in New York County here, we lost a lot of these tighter, suburban races. We lost school board seats in Dallastown. We lost a school board race in York Suburban. We didn't bring many seats back, or any seats back for that matter, in Central York. So again, we've been kind of on the downhill slope. Democrats outperformed us this past election. They brought out like 10,000 more voters across the county. Even though the GOP did bring out another close to 6,000, we just couldn't compete with Democrat turnout. I think this is an ongoing trend of this long 15-year change in our demographics and our voting patterns here in New York. And it's concerning. I mean, we have our areas of praise. Our rural votes have been doing very well over the past, I would say, decade here, ever since the emergence of Donald Trump in 2016. Areas like Chanceford, Manheim Township, your own area, some areas up north too have been performing very well over the past decade, 15 years. But it really comes down to our suburban core, York Township, Springersbury Township, Manchester, Spring Garden. It's just this trend of slowly going more and more to the left. So it's a cause for concern. I kind of kicked this journey off probably about 4 years ago, really investigating into this trend of this electoral shift. I think after the defeat of 2020, followed up by the minimal red wave that we had in 2022, I just really wanted to investigate where are we really at. Because I would go back. I'm a data guy. I would go look how Mitt Romney performed in some of these districts, and some places in Springersbury, he was pulling about 65-70% vote, which we see in 2020, 2024. Some of those precincts are now voting Democrat. So it's just I really started asking questions what is causing the shift, and what does this mean for Republicans as we move into the future. Another area, Spring Garden 4. That's some really historic area in New York. Wyndham Hills is there. It's right in the college area too. Some neighborhoods around the college. Again, it's traditionally a Republican stronghold in Spring Garden, and it's swung close to 15 points to the left over the past 15 years. So again, the whole idea was just there's a problem. We have a change in demographics in the suburban area, and what is causing it? How bad is it really? And what's it mean for Republicans going forward? So that's kind of the problem that I set out to solve, and kind of the things that I have noticed. So I guess we can really start with that. Again, just jumping right into Spring Garden, I already alluded to Spring Garden 4. Again, these are areas that were voting really predominantly for Mitt Romney. They were predominantly voting for people like Congressman Platts, Congressman Scott Perry, And again, now we're seeing these areas like swing 10 points to the left. And now that brings like, why is this like happening? Is it a aging demographic that's been kind of moving out and getting retirement age and new younger people moving in there? Is it a communication problem? Is it a like communitarian? Are we kind of losing our communitarian roots as Republicans? So it's just a plethora of problems that just keeps spreading and spreading and spreading out more into the suburbs. So I'll start with that. Any questions you have about that initial like monologue of kind of this demographic problem that I see and where we want to kind of go with that from there?
So as far as Springbury, I was looking at the report and it showed the municipality rings in Springersbury and what I think was West York or East York, I think it was, and they're all turned Democrat by like 1 or 2 points. There's not one single Republican stronghold in that municipality. And so what do you think that is due to? I mean, we just had a mayor, I think it was a mayor race for York City this past 2025 election where the Republican lost and I think the Democrat won, and that. So do you see that governor race being part of why the rest of the municipalities are turning blue in Springersbury area?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's a great like this past election, 2025. You just look at the Commonwealth Court race, you look at the Superior Court race. We lost all 8 precincts in Springersbury Township, which historically, like we're at least taking 5, 6, 7. Some good. We're usually typically losing Springersbury 1, but in a good election, we're sweeping 7 precincts, and maybe 1 or 2 are tight, but that was not the case this election. I think it's a combination of things. Number one, as we kind of back in 2019, we had Act 77 that kind of shifted the way we vote here in Pennsylvania. And, on the tail end of COVID, it really just accelerated it. It's that vote by mail. And the Democrats have been doing a really, really good job of being able to organize and have a good push to vote by mail. One of our district captains of the GOP brought to my attention. There was this PAC out in the Philadelphia area that sent a mailer out to a lot of Democrats. It was pretty much this letter written by Governor Josh Shapiro. Again, Governor Josh Shapiro is a very popular Democrat. He performed until Stacey Gary or Donald Trump came on Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro is one of the highest vote getters and one of the best performers here in Pennsylvania. But he wrote he had a letter that was sent out to a lot of Democrat household. I'm not sure the exact like voting demographic, except for the strong Dems. If they're Dems that vote at all these different elections, but he sent this like mailer out to them. And it wasn't his governor's letterhead, but it was his like letterhead, just outlining why it's important to vote by mail. Here's a filled out mail-in ballot application. All you need to do is put your social security numbers, your driver's license, and just send it back in the mail. And they're really effective at that. And once that gets pushed back out to the mail, that's recorded with data by a Department of State, and they have these like weekly dumps of people who have sent in their mail-in ballot request forms, and also which ones are ballots going out. And now you just have a mail-in ballot chase program going and knocking on those doors. So I think this is a common problem that we're seeing in these kind of off-year elections when maybe Trump's not at the top of the ballot or we don't really have this like large momentum. Is they're really really utilizing the mail-in ballot vote, and we're already we're already working uphill to try to combat that on the election day. On top of that, too, they had the energy. So that's not, again, kudos to them, but that's something as Republicans we have to get that together. There's no excuse for us not to. Again, I was a big supporter of, if you want to vote, vote in person, show an ID. But I think that's all great, but we're not there yet in Pennsylvania. We had the chessboard is set. You play with the chessboard. So I just believe that mail-in ballots are here. They're here to stay for right now until we get a Republican governorship, a Republican Supreme Court, and a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate. So until then, let's just use what we have. Let's really push a good mail-in ballot push and chase, kind of decrease that that pretty much that leverage that they have on us on election day by having all those mail-in votes. Let's kind of push it forward a little bit. If we can get 30 to 40% of mail-in ballot submission, I think we'll be well on our way, because we already turn out really well on election day. But yeah, so that momentum and trickled into a lot of these other races. Again, I think I said in my election report, you saw, York City mayor, again, I've always been a very traditional Democrat area. Sandy Walker took that really without any opposition. Down the mayor of Hanover, again, not. I mean, I understand that initially there was a Republican race, and it was between Susan Whitman and Heidi Horn. I'm going to pronounce this, Heidi Hornberger. Race that ran, Susan Whitman won, and then Heidi kind of got enough signatures to go on the Democrat ballot. And because of the momentum the Democrats already had on election day, they took 3 precincts in Hanover Borough. We're not used to losing precincts in Hanover Borough. That's been something that we don't necessarily like lose, but they took the southern half of Hanover, which comes on to this growing trend of a larger growing base in southern Hanover. And also trickled into Red Line Borough. We lost a seat on the Borough Council in Red Line. We lost seats in Seven Valleys Borough. We lost seats even in here in New Salem. There were some Democrats. It's just this larger trend we see of these local races that we're just slowly losing. Maybe not because maybe sometimes we're going to have Republican candidates running, but also a lot of times the Democrats are using the tools that they have, and they're have the enthusiasm right now. They have some momentum. As Republicans, we gotta be that brick wall to stop that momentum. We really gotta focus. We gotta strategize. You can't just think one election at a time. We can't be reactionary. It's that long-term strategy. And we're not going to win back all these precincts overnight. But if we have a good 5 to 10-year strategy, we can start chipping away at these partisan preferences. We can take back those precincts we lost in York Township. We can take back those precincts that we're losing in Manchester. Make sure we keep West Manchester Township kind of where it's at right now, improve. And then we can slowly chip away at Spring Esbury and, eventually Spring Garden, which is a good 10, 15-year plan. But that's exactly what the Democrats did to us. Again, I'm sorry if I'm rambling here, Stephen, but the Democrats, they're planners. Like, I remember when I worked for the RNC in 2020, I jumped on a Democrat training just to listen to what they're saying, what they're preaching, how they're approaching it. And you're teaching people who are running in these really conservative areas, the ones who typically have traditional Republican majorities, they're run for office, but don't necessarily plan on winning your first time around. Chip away 2 points, then run again the next year or 2 years later and chip away another 2 points, run again, another 2 points. And then maybe 8 years down the road, this precinct that you've been chipping away at is now a toss-up. And now you're able to have some, competition and be competitive. And if the winds blow the right way at the national level and the state level, you might be able to pick up the momentum where you can win that seat. And Republicans, we just got to start thinking the same way. We can't be so reactionary. We have to think long-term. We have to think strategy. And, it's not just in New York City. It's in the suburbs. It's in Hanover. It's in Shrewsbury, and it's up north too.
Yeah, Democrats are definitely they seem to be more organized and to unite behind one another than our side. The Republicans seem to, where we seem to be infighting and seem to be losing ground, where Democrats seem to know how to stand behind one another. It doesn't matter if it's legislation that's good or bad, or a bad issue, or whatever, or just getting out and voting. They seem to be able to just chip away at the Republican stronghold and hold behind each other. You can even see that in the White House in Washington D.C. and even in the State House. Just how they get behind each other, and we are like, what are we doing? We're fighting with each other. Who's going to pass this bill? Who's going to run for office? And we should have done this, or why aren't you standing for that? And they're just all unified together. There was one progress that was made in 2024. Progress was almost made, and it was Jasmine Rivera, who ran in the East York, which has always been a stronghold Democrat county, a part of the county, with the 95th district, and she almost broke the stronghold for the Democrats and got in there. There's definitely hope for Republicans in York County, or in the inner York City part, for sure. If she can break that stronghold, and we can get more Republican voters or Democrat voters switch over to Republican, and hopefully with the momentum coming in 2026 and 2028, that you'll start to see more Republicans in that little area as well. I also know that it was up towards, not 95th district, but there was up towards 80, yeah, like towards 83 and such, where we are at is also more Democrats than there are Republicans. CJ Waggle and I were talking about that a while back, and we're starting to see more Democrats up there as well. And even like in your report said West Mannheim, which is strange, but I think it's because it's right there on the border of Maryland and Pennsylvania. That little portion of West Mannheim 1 and 2 have also become blue, and the corridors of Shrewsbury. In your report said that it was also blue, which I can understand because that's also the Maryland Pennsylvania 83, 83 right outside 83 part that people moving in. So it's just hard to believe that West Mannheim part is also in Hanover. So far south, it has become it's always been Republican, and now you have three or four people in the Hanover Council that are Democrats, that seem to take it over, and they have a majority in that now. Um, I just, I just never thought to see Hanover become as blue as it's becoming. Um,
Mhm.
and part of that is because I look at my list because Kate Klunk's district 169 in their committee is all Hanover Borough, um, for most of their stuff, and like it's a hit and miss with precinct committee people in those precincts, and you can't seem to get people to stay. You can't find people within that boroughs to actually run for those, and that makes a huge difference. Um, so what from your perspective, what do you think that those issues are, um, why it's turning blue and so forth?
Yeah, I think you have a great you framed the problem really well. And actually, that was one thing that was really astonished me. I was looking back at the results comparing like 2023 to 2025. Yeah, that West Mannheim, specifically like precincts like one and two, there was one of those precincts that like Republicans only won by like 16 votes, which is like a really thin margin. And I think it comes back to like, you really got to examine like the demographic, like how York County is evolving. The York County that I know right now was not the York County that I grew up in. I was born and raised in Dallastown. Went to Dallastown school districts. After I finished college and kind of set with the National Guard, I decided to stay in New York. And that's just as like a lot of other of my peers who love York County and they want to make this place their home. But it's the same exact thing. I hear the same exact things that York County is not the same. I think because one of that is we do have a growing population, and in order to meet those needs, we've been developing. And if you look at the county laid out a economic or a pretty much a population growth plan where they're having these certain areas. We have these primary growth areas. So imagine like the ring around New York City, the suburbs like Yorktown, just Brinketsbury. We also have areas like Shrewsbury and New Freedom, who also have primary growth areas. And then even out in the Hanover area, up north, then you have like these secondary like growth areas, like you see in Loganville, Springfield. Like when you get off the Loganville exit, you have the whole Logan's Reserves. Like that was built in a secondary area, like growth area. So the county is kind of like dividing how they want to kind of grow while they want to maintain like agricultural heritage. But then you got to realize like we're growing, but is it because your Countyans are having we're settling down, having more kids, having more families, and have a growing population? It may be a little bit true, but I think the larger picture is it's kind of what we're seeing in Lancaster, what we're seeing here in New York is we're getting this large population of people who are fleeing the high prices of the Democrat policies in Maryland, and they're coming up to Pennsylvania to get away from them, to have lower property costs, to have like lower taxes, to be able to have more affordability, and they're establishing their roots here and just taking and then commuting down to Baltimore, Hunt Valley, Westminster, wherever it might be in Maryland, they're working to get those wages, the Maryland wages, but to get away from the higher taxation and the cost of living as well. So I think that's one, and that's why we're seeing a little bit of a shift towards this because a lot of these people they're coming up here from Maryland and they bring their politics with them. I have a buddy who's a realtor, and he was telling me how he was showing this Maryland couple a property in the New Freedom area. And again, New Freedom is traditionally a very conservative area, and you see the Trump flags flying from people's houses, and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" They're making comments about the Trump flag, but they don't realize is that's the underlying like culture, like especially Southern New York County. They're like known for their individualism spirit and they're rugged, and then how like they are. like patriotic, and a lot of them do gravitate towards Trump because like Trump speaks to the average like person who's in these rural areas, small town USA. But when you have these growth areas, you're bringing people who maybe don't really share those same similar values because they were brought up differently. They lived in different electoral areas. They'll bring those with them too. That's why, in New Freedom, you see a lot of these high density residential areas popping up there, along with these new like breweries, these new businesses, which are great. I'm all about business and growth, but it's something that is new, that is tradition. It goes a little bit against what the traditional like culture has been. Same thing in Hanover. That's why we saw like the southern end of Hanover is developing, putting high density residential, whether it be like condos, apartments, and even here in like York Township. I remember like my grandfather, he's buried in Dallastown, and I was visiting him at his gravesite one day. And again, I always loved his gravesite. It was very beautiful. The rolling hills, you can see the lights of the stadium at Dallastown. And then I was deployed for a year, so I didn't really get to see him, like, and visit him for almost like a year and a half, 2 years. And when I came back after deployment to visit him again, I look up and I see a cornfield that it was very beautiful, right near like Chapel Church, just developments like of duplexes, of condos. And my grandfather, if you would see her today, he would have a fit because he was a farmer. He grew up in a very rural area, but it's just this development that like it's going against the kind of traditional like us growth of Europe, or bringing in a lot of these like Maryland voters are turning the tables blue, which goes into your next point about like how do we really combat that? Well, the biggest thing is making sure like we are being able to communicate with these new voters, articulating the things that make York County great, and like it's about like assimilation too. Like, you can talk to these voters and how like we can help them assimilate into our own culture of why we have lower housing prices, all like why York County is known for manufacturing, why it's known for being muscle town USA because of our strength. But that takes like, a good, strong committee. And a lot of these committees have to be able to really forward plan. And again, I believe that organizations start from the ground up, and that does take committee people. And we do have a lot of vacancies. We did, and even a lot of the positions we do have filled aren't elected committee people; they're appointed people, which I think is a problem because, like, again, we want to have a strong like party. We have to have a strong like committee. And I'm not saying our committee people are weak people; are really awesome committee people. But once once we get these people bought in, it's not just about them having to show up and vote for whoever they want to endorse, whoever they want to elect as chair. It's about also like training them, giving them tools equipped to understand like what is it that a Republican committee person does? What is our core message? What resonates with these voters? How is this area changing? Can we like understand how voter registration demographics are changing? Can we also understand like how to knock doors? Like, how to like use these like voter contact apps? How do we register voters? How do we work a poll on election day? Like these certain things that like you get involved in politics, you might not necessarily know, but through training, through exposure, you can eventually have all these tools to go out into the world and really spread the Republican causes, change people's minds, have those conversations, plant those seeds. But that takes a good structure of a committee, and it takes like years. And it's a culture change. You got to be able to change a culture. So it's like realizing when people join the committee that it's more than just voting. It's more than just working a poll on election day. It's an everyday grind to be able to really push that needle. Because at the end of the day, like I always heard this great quote when I worked for the RNC, like the grassroots, like especially in these national elections, they are going to push the needle like anywhere from 2 to 5%, and that's a lot. Speaking about somewhere in like West Manheim Township, where a vote or a precinct decided by 16 votes, that's the difference between a precinct going red or going blue, and that all adds up over time. So yeah, it's really important we do find like good committee people, and we do have people who are maybe here from Maryland who do share our values, who do share our beliefs. It's important we do find those people and get them brought in here and get them plugged into, if there's an open precinct, even if there is a precinct filled, if there is 2 committee people, getting them out to a training, getting them to an event, and making sure like they're bought in here. And we just build coalitions, we build families, we build a good organization from the ground up, because once like the community people level is thriving, that's going to make the district captain's jobs a lot easier. That's going to make the executive board's job much easier. It's going to make the elected officials' job much easier, because all these community people are actively working here to spend Republican values, to spend Republican causes, and then they in return can be up in Harrisburg fighting for lower taxes. They can be in Harrisburg pushing good policies. They can be down in D.C. Trying to keep codifying the Trump agenda that he's been pushing. They can do all these great things, but when we have these races people are concerned about, they might not be necessarily concerned about as much being in pushing legislation rather like worrying about electoral politics back at home. When you have a good, strong committee that can really actively push and fight for you, it gives you more of a advantage to be up pushing good legislation. That's why it's so critically important we have good committee people. And it used to be. I remember I was raised in the area of Todd Platts here in the York County Committee. And I remember going to a dinner with Todd when I was very, very young. I guess one of our Republican committee dinners, and I never seen the turnout I never seen a turnout at a committee event like I saw there. I was at Wise Haven. If you guys are familiar with Wise Haven, both like the bottom floor and the top floor were just filled with tables, people, and desks. There was this enthusiasm. And again, this was also a Bush era election too, and Bush didn't have all the populism and all the energy that Trump brought here too. So that's something that the committee can cultivate during a Bush era. Imagine if we just had some organization be able to plug people in during the Trump era. We can get these areas rocking and rolling, filled with energy. We kind of did start to see that too in 2020 in the wake of COVID. It's just a couple of things fall through national politics and we're sitting behind the eight ball.
Would you say that it would be? You mentioned about appointed committee people and elected committee people being in the precincts. Would you say that it would be better not to appoint them, but have them run in that election and get elected rather than be appointed because it's easier for them to drop out?
I mean, I think number one, if you're just new to politics and you want to get involved and you come out to the committee and there's a vacancy, I'm all for it, getting someone appointed because there's energy there. I believe there's also like a kind of like a system. Like when I work for the RNC, if someone just comes out and say, I want to get involved, the first thing you're not doing is getting them put into a committee person spot. You want to kind of establish those guys, you bring them in, you have a one-on-one, you talk to them, figure out why they want to get involved, what they want to get involved in. Do they want to knock doors?
Right.
Make phone calls. And then from there, you can make an ask like, hey, we're going out to knock doors this weekend at Springisbury, or we're going to go knock doors in Hanover. Would you want to come? You give them that ask. They say, sure, I'm down. Well, there they're committed. You can then easily get them plugged in there, appointed, and then they can start doing the job of the committee person in that district. But what I say is I think it's really important that committee people do get elected because I think it shows that in order to get on the ballot for being a committee person, you need 10 signatures within your precinct. I know it's easier in some precincts than others because you have precincts like Springfield Township that has like thousands of voters, or you might be in a place like Fawn Borough that might have like 100 voters. So I understand that some certain areas are more difficult, but having going out and getting those signatures, having that buy-in shows that you are really committed. Not saying that if you're appointed, because again, I was appointed to my position too, and I'm very grateful for that. But getting elected too, it means you're established there. It's really a lot harder for a removal if you're really doing your job. Appointing, there's more flexibility. But at the same time, I think getting elected shows that there's buy-in. It shows that people are really committed. And I think as the chair of the YRs, that's the one thing we're really pushing towards. We're finding where the YRs are. They're already doing a lot with the organization, but let's take that next step. Let's get them plugged in the committee. Let's figure out these precincts that they're at, get them on the ballot. I'll be out there helping them. If this is their first time doing something in politics, and they don't know how, really have been door knocking for, I'll be with them, knocking doors, getting those signatures to get on the ballot, because I think it shows something if you're getting elected to the position, because it shows that you're committed. It shows that you want to be a change for good and you're willing to go out there and do the work. Again, not saying if you're not going out there getting the signature, you're disappointed, you're not willing to do that too. I'm just showing that this is a good benchmark instead of having the whole escalation program where you're asking a person to come here to there to really show they're committed. Just doing those small little things and getting on the ballot just shows that they're committed enough that they're going to be effective committee.
Okay. So going back to the numbers, voter registration and data trends, the independent surge in York County this week, independent registrations grew nearly twice as fast as either the majority party. Why are we seeing this massive shift toward unaffiliated status right now, and how does the GOP capture those voters?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think this is laying into a national trend. We do see a growth of third parties, of people who are going to the independents, and I do think because there is a distrust of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Again, whether it be because they're not being enough, pro MAGA agenda, or they're not being America first, people are not trusting the current political parties. So they are moving to this third party because they want better like candidates, and it's something we have to like recognize. And that's not saying that people who do it register as like independents or a third party aren't going to vote for Republicans when come the general election. But the fact of the matter is that they're disenfranchised. So I think the one thing Republican Party is like lacking is good communication. Like, I think Trump's really starting to make that push there. Um, and I think he has 365 days. I think it was just yesterday, 2 days ago, and he comes out with all his accomplishments. I think it's really important that as either committee people, as Republicans, we really do stress on the wins that like Trump has, because he does have a lot of great. There's a lot of great things going on in this country right now. Like I just saw fentanyl deaths are down, which is amazing because fentanyl has been one of like the highest like killers of individuals in the United States. Border crossings are down, which is great, because during the Biden administration we saw these caravans, these military age men just flowing freely, and I think that also brings the fentanyl problem. They go hand in hand. Um, along like same thing with like economic growth as well too. The gas station right by my house. I've just been used to seeing $3, $3, $3. Well, now it's down to like $2.80. It comes up and down 10 cents regardless. But some of these prices now, I'm not saying there aren't things Republicans need to work on, because you still go to the grocery store, cost of living. I think all young people will be the first ones to say like cost of living still needs to be addressed. I know things are in the works to be able to work, and maybe with everything going in effect with the big beautiful bill, maybe we see a little bit of cost of living adjustment over the next couple of months. I think that'll be a really big indicator heading in towards the election. But also too, just like people are upset with some of the things that Trump did because we're not staying ahead of the communication. Um, I know like a lot of people, there are people who are preaching like the America First agenda. They want to strive to be all America First people. There are people in that sector who don't think Trump's being enough America First, whether it be giving money to South countries in South America, whether it be having military intervention into Venezuela. These are just the arguments that they're laying out there, whether it be giving money to other foreign countries, whether through the Middle East or in Europe. They don't think Trump's being America First enough. But it's just our jobs like to be able to articulate those wins, even though like they might have those opinions. We need to meet them in the middle, try to have these discussions, have these conversations to be able to like articulate our points to show like what Trump is doing well, because the success of Trump is going to dictate the results in the 2026 midterm elections. The better Trump is doing, the better we're going to be off as an American, but as a Republican Party as well too. If Trump does well, Stacey Garrett is going to do well. If Trump does well and he succeeds, Scott Perry's going to do well and he's going to succeed in his election. So it's really important that we just really go and stress those wins. I understand that not everyone's happy and some people just really fixate on the losses, which is, again, it's good to be critical of ourselves, but we also have to acknowledge that there are good things that are happening right now in this country. And I think we are better off where we are today than we were a year ago when President Joe Biden was in office. I can't even say like he wasn't even there. It just that the economy wasn't there, but we're in a better place in America today. We have to be able to articulate those visions and those things that Trump has. We're just not doing a good enough job as a party. But I think if we really fixate on that in 2026, we can have some success in the midterm elections and kind of shrug off this narrative that it's going to be historically a blue wave that's going to come in here.
The statewide Democrats and independents are outplacing Republican registration by a significant margin. This reverses the trend we saw in 2024. Is this temporary post-election bounce for the left, or do we need to pivot our ground game immediately?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you see it's easy, in the military, it's easy to be on. It's when you're on the defense, it's hard to really progress because you're constantly defending yourself and not on the offense. But I think right now, Republicans, especially post like 2024, we've kind of settled into that defensive posture. We're not really articulating our message or our agenda. We're kind of too busy defending all like the attacks by the media, all the attacks by these like Democrats, we're kind of just like deflecting them instead of really driving forward. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's the messaging portion, which we touched on earlier. And I think we just have a little bit of complacency as Republicans. We've seen people in 2024, they're everywhere trying to register voters, gun shows, carnivals, churches, anywhere that there's people that is in the public square, Republicans are out there trying to get them to make sure they're registered to vote. I think we saw in 2025, we kind of slid back a little bit. I think it's just, typical, hey, we won Congress in 2024. We won the presidency. We can retain the Senate. We have the Supreme Court. Like, job's done. Like, we're winning here. But then we kind of have that complacency sets in, which, like, we can never ever ever take the foot off the gas. Like, if anything, that's the time to double down on our efforts. Um, and I think we kind of like set into that complacency. I think we're kind of got woken up with this 2025 election after we saw how badly we got defeated at the statewide just retention races. After seeing how bad our like statewide Supreme Court candidates did, I think we were like, okay, we really want to win in 2026. We really want to, Governor Josh Shapiro out of the governor's mansion. If we really want to make sure Scott Perry goes back down to D.C., we have to get off. We can't be complacent to offer hands and go out. I'm not saying everyone's complacent, but there are a lot of great people out there doing work. Scott Prester and his early vote action and a lot of Turning Point USA was out there, but it takes more than just these. It takes everybody. We need to go out there, all hands on deck, all committee people, all volunteers, and it is a trend we constantly see, but it's just something we have to get into our fabric and into our culture. That it's just the job's not done. There's always more to do. Things are good, but they can be better. So let's just keep our foot in the gas and keep driving forward. So I think in moving into 2026, like voter registration has to be an area to focus on, but it also just can't be the only area to focus on, because we did also have the voter registration edge in 2025. We started to see, PA really close that gap. We're like, we're going to do it. PA is going to flip red. And in 2026, after the election, it starts to widen again. So we need to focus on voter registration, but it's equally as important to making sure we have everyone turn out to vote. And that comes back to the mail-in ballot pushes and chase. As Republicans, we really have to have a good, solid plan. And it can't just be all these like different organizations doing their own thing. It has to be a collaborative effort, because it doesn't make any sense if we're all just focusing our efforts in like this one area, whereas we can just, spread out, we can work together, we can canvass it in different areas and really drive the good. I know as young Republicans, I made a pledge in 2026, we are going to make an effort to do a mail-in ballot push and chase. We're going to start out slow. We're going to find a couple of precincts in the primary election where we can really figure out how we can get this good program up and running. And then we have our test run in the primaries, see where our successes are, see where we might need to readjust. And then when it comes to the general election, we're full speed ahead. We're going to be going out there, going to those areas that we're traditionally underperforming in, and we're going to be pushing these mail-in ballot request forms, and we're going to be chasing them back up. We're going to be reminding them, hey, make sure you send your ballot in. We're going to be reminders. We're going to have the individual take the responsibility to send in his mail-in ballot, to do those things. And we're going to give them the information too. There's a lot of information out there, because voting can be confusing by mail. There's a lot of like do's and don'ts. And sometimes I think we shoot ourselves in the foot for not being able to articulate the do's and the don'ts to the average person. And it means going out to the doors saying, hey, I know you requested a mail-in ballot, but now you want to vote in person. You can still do that. Just make sure you bring your letter. Make sure you forfeit it at the actual, your precinct, and you can go and you can forfeit. You can go actually vote. But if you're just going to bring your ballot and not your envelope, you're probably going to vote provisional ballot. So just being able to making sure you have these things articulated to the average voter. And it's not just, door knocking. It's doing what you're doing right now, Stephen. You have this podcast where you're reaching hundreds of voters like every week, going out there and making sure you're articulating online here. Hey, here's how you vote by mail. Hey, here's how you register a voter. And you can have these stored for everyone to come back and view. And that's one thing I think Republicans, we were doing so well in 2024. We kind of took our foot off the gas. So we got to revitalize that in 2026 here. I know as YRs, we have a whole slew of just videos that we're going to be posting, whether it's just talking to voters, whether it's like doing actual like grassroots campaigning or like voter contact. We want to make sure the information's out there. The Democratic Party, they have their own sites out there where you can go out and find their historical archives of trainings. We need to have that as Republicans, and we're going to lead the charge as the YRs in order to do that.
So this goes back to like one of the biggest pet peeves that I always had, and I found it even quite frustrating as a candidate running as school board as I knocked doors all over Southwestern School District, was people not knowing that we have election coming up. Mm-hmm. And we have an election like almost every 4 months or so. I think it is in Pennsylvania. How do you go about reminding people that we have election before the election happens, so they are prepared to vote. Because I think that's where we lose complacency. Um, Also, because of the whole, because we got the White House, like you said, we got the Supreme Court, we got the Congress and the House, and they fall into complacency, and then they forget that we have a local election, which is the most important of elections up. It starts from the ground up, and it's the most important. If the local county and cities are not doing good, then national can't help. So, how do you go about reminding people that these municipal elections are the most important? These are the ones that affect your family, affect your kids, affect your taxes, and state laws and state legislation and the courts. How do you go about reminding people that we have election every year, almost like 2 to 3 months?
Stephen, that's a wonderful point you brought up there. These local elections are important. Like politics is local. Like you don't realize how much impact your school board has on you compared to like the executive branch. Like the most impact you're gonna have is at your local levels. So I think you can have the short term answer and you have the long term answer. The short term answer is like you need to put resources into it, whether that's door knockers going out and when you have get the vote out efforts, you're knocking on doors, reminding people. You might not be able to convince everyone, but at least you can go hit as many doors as you can, remind them there's election coming up here, reminding them like if you're in a school district and you're opposed to your school tax just got raised, reminding them, hey, school tax raised this amount many times. If you don't like your tax being raised, get out and vote for your local school board reps. Whether it's being your township supervisors. If something popped up in your neighborhood that you don't like and you don't like the way it's zoned, being able to going out there and approaching, hey, if you don't like how something's happening in your township, or you supervise with these zoning boards that happen, like go make your voice heard at the election box. That's the best way to make your voice heard. It's about pouring resources against the get the vote out efforts on the ground. It's again going out online, like having a digital campaigns, talking to voters, constantly reminding them. Like even if you tell them like one time, sometimes it's not going to stick. It's that constant 3, 4, 5 contacts that they're going to need to remember, like, oh wait, yeah, there is a election happening, and it takes getting the institutions bought in as well too. I know a lot of time like schools will announce, radio stations we're going to be like, hey guys, don't forget there's an announcement. There's a election coming up in 1 week here. This, if you have any questions, go visit the PA Department of State here to find your local poll. It's having send out mailers, not just sometimes it may not just be those active Republicans, but it's like all Republicans. It's again the short term answer is an all hands on deck. It takes resources, it takes time, it takes strategy. It can't just be like, and again, there's a lot of different organizations in a lot of different groups, but it takes that unity. It takes that like understanding, hey, here's the shared mission. Let's all take our efforts as our groups to really push this message. And we all reach our certain like factions. There might be a person here, it reaches everyone at the school age, PTAs, the PTOs, the school boards, but there might be someone up here who's great with the elderly, who's constantly in nursing homes that can be able to say like, hey, here's this election. And if you're not gonna be able to vote by in person, like here's a vote by mail. So again, just a constant approach here. And then on top of that too, the long-term answer is it's civic knowledge and civic education. I think one thing that's been declining amongst like especially my generation and our generation is like the baseline civics like knowledge. A lot of people don't know that like there's an election more than every 4 years. That happens every single year. It's just these like small things that you're supposed to be taught in your civics education to just go and notice. That's why like some of the best civically minded people I know are people that are homeschooled or people who you just have that like attention to detail to history. So I think it's instilling that culture that like, while all these like subjects are important, one of the most important things is civics. And I think it was Vivek Ramaswamy during his presidential campaign. I thought this was one of the greatest ideas. Like one of the requirements for anyone who graduating high school is be able to pass a civic test. That someone who's come to this country as an immigrant has to be able to pass as well, because it is so important to understand who we are as a culture, what makes America America, what is happening at our elections, and understand like where does responsibility lie. And I think that's one of the core principles as conservative. We understand that like politics is not the federal government. We understand that in order to have a good functioning society, politics need to be local, and it starts with individuals who are civically minded, who meet people and make families, who meet a spouse, who meet a woman, and they can make family, have kids, and then constantly work on that family, grow them, develop them, make them, arm them with the sword of truth. And once they are able to adequately care for their family, they have more responsibility, or they can go to their church, and then they can go to their Rotary Club, they can go to their GOP and give more and more and more. Because once you have good individuals, and you have great families, and once you have solid families, you have great organizations, and once you have great organizations, you have great communities, and once there's great communities, there's great states, and once there's great states, there's a great nation. But it comes down to it. It doesn't start at the top. A lot of people came in thinking like that Donald Trump is going to be the answer, everything's going to change when he was elected, and a lot of stuff did change. What's more important is what happens at home, at the local level, and it just constantly reinforcing that. And it takes that communication. And it's an uphill battle too, because it's tiring. We're saying the same thing over and over and over. I know, Steve, you've been doing it for all these years. We've been working with each other since like 2020. You've been constantly online talking about committee people's slots. You've been constantly talking about civics. And sometimes you gain an inch, but then like you lose a mile, because you might gain like 3 or 4 people as like committee people. Then it's like you lose some. And it's just like that constant uphill battle. But like if we're all doing it, it's slowly going to work way uphill. We may have some losses, but like it takes a village to be able to really elevate the party up to where it needs to be, really elevate where we need to be as a society. And again, it's civics. It also comes back to the institution of a big Christian institution of religion, teaching those good morals and values that can help shape and put those guardrails on society. That's also equally important, and that takes good households, because once those good households can then take the lessons you're learning in church and keep them enforced within your actual homes, and they can teach those lessons, not just saying you need to do this, but like here's why you need to do this. This is why, like that's following this book. It's going to set you up for success, not like letting your kids turn to these false false prophets online, because it's really easy, especially for young men who are just searching for like meaning. It's so easy for us to turn to the wrong people online to like get our values from, but it's just so important to have good families to really instill those values, have the guardrails in life, and constantly reinforcing. And like I said, it's the hierarchy responsibility once those things happen, and that's what really is going to be able to push people into the civics minded and get people out voting for these elections at the local level, because it takes, again, a log effort at first, and then a long-term strategy as well. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place here, Stephen. I'm answering a lot of answering questions you're not even asking me as well.
And Charlie Kirk also believed that. He said it was one of his main things that he always said was get married, have kids. Because if you get married, you have kids, you go to church, become conservative, you can outnumber the Democrats and outnumber the Democrats with your kids and then with your families. And it's one of the family and the church are one of the oldest institutions in the government.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, he actually said that's like one of the. He said that's more important than going to college, actually. So, but so back to the other one, the data blackout. The PA Department of State hasn't updated district level data yet, without knowing exactly where these new voters are, congressional or House districts. How much of our current strategy is flying blind?
That's a good question. Again, I've been trying to keep historical data. I know they upload every Monday. They upload more data about at least like the statewide election like totals. And I'm not sure what the exact periodic for it is for House districts, but when I was collecting this data this week, it wasn't updated. I don't know if it's updated now. I haven't checked today. But it is important too, because you want to be able to like, again, we have you have the whole state of Pennsylvania up here. You got this bird's eye view, but it's really important to narrow down, because if you start to see trends, like let's just say, I don't know, Springfield Township, and has this just large registration of Democrats. Well, that's obviously an area for concern, and then you can then raise your red flags, like whoa, whoa, whoa. There's this area here that needs a little bit of attending to. Then you can allocate resources and kind of, I hate to be reactionary, but like part of like politics is being able to react to like what is happening in the political environment. You react to it. So I like to just really focus in on that level. And I know it doesn't get down to the actual precinct level. It's more so like the lowest level it goes is like state house district. But that's equally important as well, because like all these state house districts are set such a way that if like in a long term, any of these house seats can really be like flipped. And the 47th of Manchester just keeps going more and more blue. If East Manchester keeps going more and more blue, like that's areas for concern. I'm not saying it's going to be flipped in 1 year, but it's just, that 15, 20 year like time frame, they can it may really make some ground. So that's why it's really concerning and really want to focus on the House district, which House districts we need to pay attention to, which ones might have a little bit on vote, even at the congressional level too. Like these are indicators. I know Scott Perry's in a really razor thin race right now, and we want to make sure we are allocating all the resources and arming ourselves with the most knowledge we can to ensure we he can win and stuff. And if we see trends going a certain way, hey, maybe we need to readjust our strategy and allocate more resources here and do certain more things here. Figure out maybe which legislative districts or which like our areas are we need to tend to because of those data. So again, that whole point I put on like that sit rep on the black like we weren't able to see. It was just that like I was hoping to be able to give community people a view of like, hey, in the 93rd, 4 seats went to Democrats, and the 94th, you had 12 independent seats or 12 third-party seats. I was really hoping to get that like close-up view, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to. But maybe in future weeks, if all the data gets updated, but that's something I'm be constantly looking at and hoping to be able to give to community people or give to local leaders or just give to Republicans to again arm them with truth and being able to go out there and fight.
All right. So legislative wins and the I Believe campaign. Fairness in sports. Senator Kristen Phillips Hill has just at the Supreme Court for a major rally on fairness in women's sports with the Save Women's Sports Act currently settled by Democrats in the PA House. What is the next move to force a vote?
That's a good question. Legislative, I want to know what the legislative percent. I mean, the biggest thing, if you want to make sure that bill gets to the House, take back the House. We have a minority in the House right now, and if like they have enough people, they can kind of firewall, bring that up to vote. I know the Senate does a great job, and they consider a firewall that really protects us from that radical left Josh Shapiro or House Democrat policy initiatives. But if we really want to push that meaningful legislation, then we'll first have to take back the House. I know I would love to get the first immediate effects and get that bill signed into law, but right now the House isn't cooperating. They have the majority, and they're governing the way with a strong governance. They're not budging on a lot of these issues. You would think that an issue like fairness in women's sports, you would think that's a 100% issue. Unfortunately, it's not. It's about an 80-20 issue. 80% saying like, hey, I believe that a woman should be protected in her own like sport. So you think that'd be a winning argument, but I guess not for the PA House Democrats. So again, the whole procedural way, I'm not a policy expert on the House. Might be a good question for a legislator, but I just personally, if you really want to get that vote to the floor, number one, take back the House, and then number two, take back the governorship. So that way I know Stacey Gary would sign that piece of legislation into law right away, just like that. So unless there is a short term like the procedural thing that the House Republicans can do to force a vote, I'm not exactly sure on the whole parliamentary like thing. But like long term, let's take that House back, let's take the governorship, and really just sign common sense legislation. And I'm so happy Senator Kristen Phillips Hill supports that, because I know she's been championing that up in Harrisburg, and even when she went down to the Supreme Court in DC. And I know it resonates with so many women and girls across our county as well.
Financial accountability. Representative Joe DiOrsi just hosted a town hall with Treasurer Stacey Garrity. In an era of rising costs, how critical is the Treasurer's role in protecting Pennsylvania taxpayers from state level overspending?
Yeah, no, it's a huge responsibility. I know Stacey Gary's been doing a great job, making sure that all our money is there, is accounted for. We're not having wasteful spending. She's been doing. And she's been very transparent about it too. That's why she's going on the record here with Representative DiOrsi talking about her record to be able to prove that she's doing the job in her office that it takes, especially when we have such a weird the executive branch at the state level is very different than the executive branch in the federal level, because like these positions like treasurer, you have your auditor general, you have your attorney general. They're all elected positions. They're not just appointed positions. So they're working hand in hand with the Shapiro administration, making sure any of his priorities and any of the funding that he has, there's oversight on, and that the things are properly getting funded. And there's no chance for fraud, no chance for you're kind of like another firewall for the administration. So again, she's been doing a great job, and props to Representative Dorsey for bringing her on here, being able to talk to his constituents about that. I know they're doing great things up at the treasurer's office. I know Representative Dorsey is doing great things in the 47th legislative district as well. I know I kind of use that as an example as an area that Democrats might be getting ground, but he is doing such a wonderful job of being able to also tap into the like online platforms to ensure that his message is being articulated using podcasts, using short-term content, which is again very critical.
Opposition in intelligence and messaging. The Democrat ground game. The York City Democrats just pulled in nearly 200 people and dozens of volunteers for a community dinner. They are framing their message around economic hardship and tariffs. How does the York GOP counter that narrative when voters are feeling the pinch at the grocery store?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really great point. And that's, again, kind of we alluded to it earlier today, whereas we have these wins as Republicans, again, when it maybe comes to the oil prices, maybe when it comes to, the border comes to fentanyl, it comes to all these areas. But the one area we're still feeling strained is that affordability issue. And the Democrats are doing everything they can right now to really like ride that. I know that was one of the biggest reasons in the Virginia Commonwealth race in this last election, which sat with a lot of like voters. And, we see, I know like this past weekend was Martin Luther King weekend, and that's your weekend of service. A lot of people go out there and do projects for the community. When I went to military school at Valley Forge as the class president, one of our responsibilities was finding ways we can get our student body involved on MLK Day to be able to give back. And this is the way the Democrats, again, they made it. They hosted a community dinner. They brought people into a church. They gave them meals. They fed them. So kudos, they're helping our community. That's as Republicans we need to be doing too. As the YRs, like we realize, there are, we're not quite there yet with our affordability, but like that's what individual responsibilities for. We preach that as Republicans. We don't want to always just rely on, rely on the government to fix all problems. Sometimes it does take individual responsibility. So when our neighbors in need, we step up and help. That's why as YRs, we raise 500 pounds of food for people on Easter and Thanksgiving to be able to eat. A couple years ago, we helped out food banks, and it's something we should be doing as our Republican Party. Is until we can really win this affordability issue, there's always some people in need. So kind of taking and being able to reach out to the community, to volunteer, to work at food banks, to host our own dinners. Those are critical steps to help win the community. And York County, I know we're traditionally a communitarian county. When we give back, we help our neighbors. That's why like these areas, these communities in Spring Spring Garden, always been so tight knit because we look out for each other. That's Christians. That's like what we're supposed to do. When things are going wrong with the government and people are struggling in the first place, people turn to the church. And so the Democrats did hold that, and again they can use that messaging of affordability and. As our jobs as Republicans, until we can get the good legislative wins, until we can feel the effects of maybe the big beautiful bill, until we can really hone in our spending, because we're still spending a lot down in Washington D.C. We're still at a deficit, which is how Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman always say, the more you're spending, and we have a growing deficit, and that's the tax that no one votes on because inflation is going to keep rising. I know we countered a little bit with our productivity. But we want to make sure we want to hit it at the source, which is our spending. So hopefully, we pass the big bill. I know it did increase spending a little bit, but hopefully this next type of appropriation, we can continue constraining ourselves and getting back to where we are as fiscal conservative to really stop the spending, to increase productivity. So that way we can start to feel that economic relief back at our grocery stores for us. Because, as young people, we want to buy houses. I know the median age right now is like 39 years old until people buy their first house. Like we want young families to be purchasing houses. We want 24, 25, 26. I'm a proponent of people getting married young. I think that if once you get married and have kids, you should be moving into houses. And, as our jobs as, a governing body, we want to be able to do all we can. And I know Trump introduced some legislation to restrict these like big corporations like BlackRock and all these other like institutions to be able to purchase like single family homes, which is a good step. It is our responsibility then at the state level. So then maybe figure out ways we can move taxes around, tax less to make it more achievable, and then back to local government too. Property taxes are a huge thing, and the more property tax we have, the harder it is for younger people to buy homes. So it's really on responsible spending in the local government area too.
Um, and then radical rhetoric. We're seeing Democrats lean back into January 6th rhetoric on its fifth anniversary. Is this a sign that they lack a fresh platform for 2026, or is it a calculated move to distract from local economic issues?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question there? It kind of glitched a little bit.
Yep. We're seeing Democrats lean back into the January 6th rhetoric on its fifth anniversary. Is this a sign that they lack a fresh platform for 2026, or is it a calculated move to distract from local economic issues?
I think it's one of those areas where, like, after when we saw it, it was the 5 year anniversary of January 6th, 2026. A lot of Democrats they use that as a ability to kind of reflect on the events that did happen on that day, which was a motivating factor within their own base there too. So they're really leaning into the messaging in their own base that it does like help energize their base. But I do think we're going to start to see like laying out a pop. I know a lot of it, like right now, the Democrats, I don't really see it. I start to see some clear messages start to form. But a lot of it's just like anti-Trump. But like we know, if they really want to be competitive in 2026, they're going to start to roll out these different types of messaging. They're going to really lean onto their affordability. I mean, that's kind of what got Mayor Mandami elected in New York City. Is he was one of the people who really laid out a clear vision for what he thought would be able to help this cost of living. Again, I don't agree with his economic policy and what he stands for, but a lot of people are looking for that message in New York. Like they heard that. That's what drew a lot of people to Mandami. So drew a lot of people to Bernie Sanders. I know these aren't stable and good economic policies, but like that's the type of thing that's going to really energize that base right there to have a clear like vision forward. So as Republicans, we need to be able to lay out the alternative and stuff. Like we know that we have countless examples throughout history, Cuba, the Soviet Union, all these different socialist and like communist countries. Like we know that doesn't work, but it comes back to being able to repeat, to be able to show the history, to then be able to articulate our own vision of free markets, affordability, like responsible governing, like good spending, and then even as like individuals, like realizing it does take individual responsibility, and if as much as the government can help us, we can also like really help ourselves. And that comes back to having good policy in schools, financial literacy, being able to teach kids how to spend their money, how to spend it appropriately, make sure they know how to file their taxes, make sure they know ways like how to properly invest. And you keep investing in the policies as Republicans, they're going to promote those good family economic habits. Like again, I know Hungary does a really good job of this, and they have this whole policy where it's like if you're a married couple and you're having kids, you get breaks on your taxes. I think that's good policy that we need pushing. It promotes families. It promotes good economic stability. So those are the type of things we need to keep coming in. I think the good start was with the Trump child tax, like where like every kid born in America and married family. I think it's a good start. So we have to keep echoing that because the Democrats are going to come with their own strong policy. And as the pendulum swings to the right, the pendulum swings to the left, and that might be a more of a socialist policy. And we don't know that won't work here in America.
Right. So then the road to February strategy to wrap things up. Petition season petitioning officially begins February 17th. We have 3 major training sessions coming up. Why is it vital for committee people to get trained now rather than waiting until the last minute?
Yeah, again, it's arming yourself, and I think that's one of the responsibilities of a good party is to arm the community people with the knowledge they need to know to be able to go out there and effectively communicate and effectively spread Republican messages. And the first part of this, if you want to be a committee person, you want to be elected official, you got to be able to get on the ballot. And I mean, I know there's all these different avenues of writing campaigns, but we know writing campaigns are historically like more expensive and they're a lot more time consuming. So if you can just do the proper steps, get yourself on the ballot. So it's really important to be able to get these committee people on. So that way, once they know they're on the ballot, they don't have to focus on pushing a writing campaign. They can focus on doing the job as a committee person, knowing that they're going to be on the ballot in 2026 here for our primaries. Even too, like we don't just have county committee races going on; we have state committee races going on. So, like being able to differentiate the difference between the two, differentiate, for the legislative races, the Senate races, the congressional races, the governorship. Even though I know like may not be running for those actual races, at least it's good knowledge to know like what it takes to be able to get on the ballot. Maybe that person who's running for committee person today isn't going to run for state rep today. Maybe they run for state rep in 16 years. But at least they kind of have that seed planted that they know, okay, if one of our state rep, here's how many signatures I need. Here's how I properly fill it out, so that they can keep on themselves. They don't have to worry much about the political end of it, the electoral thing. They can start to focus on what makes good policy, and they can start put and then not so focus so much on the electoral, like the election, but focus more on like the effectiveness of being good public policy makers. So that's going to be really critically important. Again, thank you for the shout out for those trainings. I'll be running those trainings. They're going to be at the county headquarters. Again, we're going to have the first one on Thursday, January 29th at, I believe, 6 p.m. And then the second one at February 3rd at the county headquarters at 11 a.m. And then too, if you can't make any of those sessions too, and if any of your listeners really want, we can even do an online one before. I won't be opposed to setting up a Zoom call. If people want to join, listen and how to do it, I'll be happy able to set one up, because I think it's really important people know these kind of things, even if they have no intention of being on the ballot. Again, it's just learning those small little tidbits that make you a better civic individual who cares about their community, who cares about their country, and again, arming themselves with truth here. So I think that's critically important.
Party zones. The sit rep names York, Manchester, and Springsbury townships as party voter contact areas. What makes these specific neighborhoods the make or break zones for Republican victory in the next cycle?
No, that's a great question. I think it comes back to our start of our conversation. These are the areas we had specifically seen the Democrats like make ground on. And again, maybe we're not seeing the effects at the countywide level because we're still winning, our countywide races. We're still winning our DA races. We're still winning our row offices. We're still winning our county commission races at like that countywide level. But when you get down, like, and we talk about politics as local, those are the areas that are, slightly moving towards the left. And that's where we saw 10 out of the 12 school board seats in like York Township, Springsbury Township, Spring Garden Township, and Manchester Township push towards the left. So, I think it comes down to, like, as Republicans, we only have so many limited resources, especially at the local level. We don't always fundraise the most amount of money. We only have so much to work. We only have so many volunteers. We have only so many hours we can invest. So it's really important we do have those hours to invest. We have that time to invest. We're really concentrating our efforts on the areas that need it the most. And those areas are waving the red flag. We need to focus on these areas, because if we don't give a little bit of attention, if we don't figure out what the core issue is here, we're going to continue to lose ground there. And right now it's trickling to York Township. Again, I think the last election, there's a total of 15 precincts. 9 of those 15 precincts voted for Democrats in 2025 in that election there. And that's historically unprecedented in York Township. And I'm a York Township boy. I was born and raised there. Like, maybe 1, maybe 2, at the most 3 of these precincts go to the left, not 9. Like, we have a lot of work to do there. So when we have the time, when we have the effort, like, let's put our resources there. Because, like, again, and then it's helping the 93rd rep. It's helping Mike Jones. It's helping Congress Smucker. It's helping Senator Kristen Phillips Hill when you invest in York Township. When you invest in Manchester Township, you're helping Scott Perry. You're helping Don Kiefer. You're helping Jody Orsi. You're helping make these ground. You're helping the Central York School District. You're helping the Dallas Town School District, York Township. So I think it's really important we focus our efforts. And even too, like in Hanover too, we saw those 3 borough precincts. They did shift to the left. Like, we should pay attention to that. In like Shrewsbury Borough, New Freedom Borough, Shrewsbury Township too. Like, these are all precincts that are slowly over time getting more and more like progressive because of the influx of voters coming up there. So let's pay a little bit of attention there, because, right now, like, in order to recognize a problem, we got to recognize it, we got to acknowledge it, and we have to be able to strategize on how we're going to fix it, because we need to fix these problems if we really care about the long-term electoral, because it's only a matter of time until, we have really one bad election and a Democrat takes a House seat on a special election, or we have one bad election and they take more school board seats in a traditionally rural conservative areas. So these are all just things we really, really need to focus on. And that's why I put in my sit rep. Like, if you have the time, like, you're going to make your money door knocking and talking to voters in this, especially now we're so far off from the election. We can really talk to people about what the issues that they care about are. We can advance our Republican message, because when it comes down to like late October, at this point, it's going to be really hard to convince people like to vote one way than ever. At this point, it's get the vote out. We're going to hit as many people as we can. We're going to get them to the polls. We're going to make sure they're voting by mail. We're going to make sure they have a strategy to vote. But right now, if we have the time, let's like talk to these people. Let's figure out like maybe why they're disenfranchised from the Republican Party, maybe why they don't like Donald Trump. Figure out some middle ground. Show us that, hey, we hear you, we're your neighbors, and even though I'm a Republican and you don't agree with me right now, but like let's find that middle ground and let's plant those seeds of truth, because you're not gonna a lot of times you're not gonna change a person's mind off of one conversation. But you put that one thing in their mind they constantly think about, where they go to bed at night thinking, that point that he made a lot of sense. Let me reflect on it. And then over time, they start to see like the way you see, and then those seeds of truth that you plant in there start to blossom, and they can start to see the picture for how it really is. That's the whole point of looking towards objective truth. You have these conversations, because I know I'm like myself, I'm not right with everything I say. I probably said a bunch of things on this podcast that's probably wrong, but like at the same time, like having these conversations to figure out what the actual truth is, and we're eventually going to get ourselves there. It's not going to be right away, but as we all stumble upward and onward. So that's what we're doing right now. And I think this is, again, really, really beneficial. And Steve, I think you're doing a great job bringing people on here, trying to find that objective truth, asking these questions to figuring out how we need to get there. So again, I really applaud you for what you're doing. We needed more of this in our party. Our committee would benefit significantly having a podcast and being able to talk to elected officials, talking to county officials, talking to Republican officials. So people should do more what you're doing right now, Stephen.
We do. Did you want to add on to the YR event that's coming up?
Yes, thank you. So yes, we have a kickoff event for the YRs. If you were here last, yep, right on the screen there. Thank you, Stephen. YR Turn the Tide. We're kicking off having a social at the Cove. Come on out. It's going to be a great conversation. We're going to have a good amount of young people out there who are all enthused, who want to make this country better, who want to make York County great, want to keep preserving the traditional and conservative character of our county. Come on, have some conversation. We're going to talk about kind of our plans for the year, figuring out like what our social we're going to have, what our fundraisers we might have, like door knockings, trainings, like it's all going to be talked about there. If you watch this podcast and you want to get more involved, like this is a good first step. Come out there, ask questions, and maybe after that you realize, hey, I want to be a committee person, or I want to at least learn more. I want to go to training. I want to outdoors. This is a great place to start. Again, we're a really welcoming environment. We'll talk to you. We'll get you involved we have a really tight-knit community. Great things happen in the YRs. We have members who join the YRs and end up getting married. We have members who join the YR and meet their best friends. It's a great organization. We do a lot of great things. It's not just all about politics too. Politics is important, but it's also about like camaraderie, family. We have pool parties. We do all these great events. Like it's a really good, tight-knit organization. So come out, check us out. Again, I really appreciate the shout out there, Stephen. Again, it's the Cove, good people at the Cove as well. The owner's a very good and conservative guy there as well too. I know he cares a lot about his community, cares a lot about York County, and they have some great selections of bourbon whiskey if you're a big bourbon whiskey fan like myself, which I'll be having because it's after dry January. So I'm doing dry January this month. So be enjoying it then. Steven, you ready for this?
Well, thank you for your time, Nick. And
for the snow?
What'd you say?
You ready for the snow coming up here? We got snowpocalypse coming up.
Yeah, we're getting close to 20 inches within 3 days.
It's a lot of snow.
Yep.
Stock up right into it.
I have a school board retreat thing to go to Saturdays. Thank goodness it's not coming until Saturday evening. So
yeah. You might not be leaving that school board retreat if you get snowed in there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Nick.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Stephen. This was great. I know we've been talking about this for a while. So finally glad I got to be able to come here and talk. And thank you again for all you do.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you for all you do as well.
Yep, thank you. Have a great day, Stephen.
Yep, you too.
Bye.
Bye.